I'm strong in faith.
Faith can move mountains.
Radio Maria
91.3 FM.
The voice of truth.
Good morning and thank you for tuning in to Radio Maria 91.3 FM. It is now time for Side by Side, where we discuss issues relating to conflict, peace, and security. I am Reverend Father Robert Achiaga. Father Loius Duniya is also here by my side. Good morning, Father Duniya.
Good morning, Father Robert. Good morning, our listeners.
We are joined by a very special guest who is quite a regular on this show. He will work side by side with us on today's show to make your time with us together profitable. I am talking about Dr. Noel Ihebuzor. You know that he is a former lecturer, a public and social policy professional with so many years of experience consulting with UNICEF, the World Health Organization, UNESCO, Institute for Peace at The Hague, and many others. You are welcome, sir. Good morning.
Thanks, Father Robert. Thank you.
Later on the show, we will also be joined by Barrister John Awa Kalu. He is also a friend of the studio and quite a voice on this show. A legal practitioner for 3 decades now, an expert in litigation, a criminal defense attorney, a property consultant, an arbitrator, medical law practitioner. Interestingly, he is also a member of the Medical Law Professionals Association of Nigeria. He will join us later on this program so that with all the insights you're going to be getting, our time together will be most rewarding. Our guests will help unpack the topic of the day, which is politics, peace, and security. I am sure our listeners do not doubt the need for a topic like this. Many political parties have already selected through the electoral process their flag bearers, but only recently have parties like the APC chosen those who will be vice presidential candidates. So we will be talking about what people are now calling the Muslim ticket. But even beyond that, we will analyze how politics interacts with other factors in our society to either produce security or insecurity, peace or conflict. So do not go away, stay with us as we undertake all of this. Before we proceed to discuss politics, peace, and security, let us quickly take a look at some side stories. Father Duniya, over to you.
Thank you very much, Father Robert, and to our listeners, as it is our practice here, we'll intimate you with some of the side stories. Here we have the Punch reporting ransom payment fueling terrorism, says presidency. Next is insecurity, Ekiti to recruit more forest guards. Punch newspaper reported this just yesterday. The Akwa Ibom Commissioner of Police orders deployment to correctional centers. Punch newspaper also reported this yesterday. And yesterday also, the Punch newspaper reported how 18 priests were kidnapped in the year 2022. A report by the Punch newspaper giving those numbers also revealed that over 3,478 Nigerians were killed, with 2,256 adopted in 7 months between December 2021 and June 15, 2022. We also have a report that says world's population to hit 8 billion by November, and that is reported on Punch newspaper yesterday. We have security situation has improved nationwide, claims the presidency, also reported by the Punch newspaper. Oyo to clamp down on unregistered motorcyclists. Punch newspaper reported this yesterday as well. 100 shops, over 350 traders affected in Bodija fire incident, according to NEMA. Daily Post reports this yesterday. Jailbreak. Sack everyone linked to attack. All service chiefs, says PDP to Buhari. Daily Post made this report. Man fakes own kidnap to swindle parents, 8 million, says Daily Post. Zulum disburses 1 billion grants for children's education projects. Daily Trust. Man kills, sells body parts of 71-year-old woman in Ogun. Death toll in Delta gas plant explosion rises to 10, says Sun newspaper. Blame Nigerians for voting bad leaders. Goats don't vote. Senator Nicholas Tofo-Womo, senator representing Ondo South Senatorial District. Punch newspaper reported this. Here too we have a headline from Daily Post that says, PDP betrayed South despite Buhari's failure. Atiku's presidency will fuel agitation, terrorism, says Adegboruwa.
Father Duniya, thanks for the stories. Let's quickly take a closer look at some of those side stories. Father Duniya, when you were taking the side stories, I was captivated by one of those. I saw you give some emotional signals. The one concerning Bodija Market. Yes, the one that says Bodija Market was on fire and so many shops were burnt down. 100 shops, excuse me, 100 shops and over 350 traders were affected in Bodija fire incident. For you and me, that's especially touchy because we spent over 8 years as students in Ibadan. And the Bodija market was that market that was a life wire for our students' cupboards. we went there again and again to buy things like gari, kuli, which of course for students, items that how do I put it now? 4-unit course, right?
Yes. if there's something like 6-unit course, you should pass for that.
Our hearts go out to all the traders there. We pray that God will help them to get back their losses and even thrive better than they are doing.
Amen.
But let us go to the very first side story that you read out to us. Ransom payment fueling terrorism, says presidency. Well, this viewpoint was expressed by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Garba Shehu, yesterday when he featured on Channels Television's Politics Today. Speaking about the implication of payment of ransom for kidnappers, Mr. Shehu is quoted to have said, "These payments, whether anybody likes it or not, will continue to fuel terrorism. We have to learn from their experiences in other lands that when you pay, you are fueling terrorism. You are fueling the hijack and kidnap of fellow citizens, and it will go on and on until when people call their bluff." Recall that in April this year, the Nigerian Senate moved to amend the Terrorism Prevention Act 2013. Part of the amendment, which has already passed third reading, seeks to outlaw the payment of ransom to abductors, kidnappers, and terrorists for the release of any person who has been wrongfully confined, imprisoned, or kidnapped. So the talk about the implications of payment of ransom has been with us for quite a while now, and our country's legislators are making some moves to outlaw the payment of ransom. But let us just give some weight to the statement from Garba Shehu about the implications of paying ransom. About 7 of those who were kidnapped from the AK-9 attacked train were released last week, Friday. And we learned from various sources that the kidnappers received 100 million per head for over 6 of them. But then there was a Pakistani who made the 7th person. For him, they collected over 200 million naira. So put together, that should be about 800 million naira for 7 persons. And then we were also informed through various national dailies that the kidnappers would no longer negotiate with the federal government. Instead, they reached out to the families of those who are still in captivity, about 43 of them, and made the demand that each family pay the sum of 100 million naira. So if you take 100 million naira times the 43 left, that's about 4.3 billion. And you add to the 8 persons received, as a result of which the terrorists have made over 800 million naira. You're dealing with about 5.1 billion naira. So when you begin to ask what are the implications of placing 5 billion naira in the hands of terrorists, you're thinking about high-grade weapons. You're thinking about all kinds of things. I think it is from this point of view that Garba Shehu has made this statement. But I guess the question on the minds of many Nigerians would be, if we do not pay the ransom, what alternatives do we really have, Dr. Noel?
Yes, thank you for that, Robert. For once, I think I'm agreeing with Shehu Garba. But I think there's also a corollary to what he said, or which he has not said, which is that federal government inaction is also fueling this whole business. So it's a question of narrative and perspective. He's chosen the narrative and the perspective that suits him best. He's not chosen the narrative that inculpates the government inaction and the government's unwillingness and incapacity to go after these people and secure the release of their citizens. Governments exist to protect citizens. And where there's a loophole in that capacity, then citizens will find alternative means to protect themselves. So what we're dealing with here is a question of what I'll call perverse incentives. Because people now know that if you kidnap people in a situation of a fairly inactive and ineffective security apparatus response, that you can put the squeeze on government and through families, through the emotional torture of on the families, indirectly enhance the pressure and get people to pay. Then what is happening here is there's a loop linking the two, that government is not doing what it's supposed to do, and terrorists are cashing on it and making a fortune. So the first questions are that what must be done to prevent this thing happening? It's no longer a question of trying to say it's fueling it. Yes, we know it's fueling it, but what is fueling the hijack, the kidnap, and this incessant attack on innocent citizens? If we address that, then we would have addressed the problem. Because for me, anytime there's a problem, what I'll call a detailed cause-effect analysis is the first step. What is causing this? There's poverty. What is causing the poverty? Bad economic policies. What is happening? People are now coping with poverty by kidnapping. So kidnapping becomes lucrative. But what the kidnapper is looking for is a window of softness, a window of opportunity to come after people who are not protected as himself. And so long as that window of opportunity is there, the terrorists will do it. Please, people shouldn't tell me that in a country like this, in the 21st century, that we don't lack the means, either geographic sensing, areas of surveillance, following the money, following the market, that we lack the capacity to identify where bands of people with about 43 captives are staying. Don't tell nobody. It doesn't make a convincing story. So if we are inactive as a government, we should blame ourselves and not blame those who are forced because of emotional trauma to pay that ransom. Yes, Shehu is right, but then what the causality analysis reveals something deeper behind it, and that is what should be addressed.
Which means it's really not enough to just say it is fueling it. If you even understand the social psychology of Nigerians paying ransom, it is not from a standpoint of strength. It is from a standpoint of weakness, actually helplessness.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That if government response was to be robust, was to be effective, was to be timely. If government had a capacity to deploy immediately and go after these kidnappers after the event, before they could settle down into a regular work pattern, we wouldn't be talking about this today. And I mean, the shame of it is that after 3 months, 42 of our citizens are still being held by an indefinite number of people. And I like what you said, Father Robert. Why are they getting the money? It is to increase their own operational efficiency. And the own operational efficiency translates into being able to do more kidnaps with more sophisticated weaponry, with more sophisticated intelligence equipment that enables them to be one step ahead of government. So why then do you then expose the populace you're supposed to guard? Why don't you do something? We've had stories. I mean, you and I are not strangers to realities in Nigeria. There was a time a citizen of a foreign country was kidnapped outside Nigeria, brought into Nigeria, and then pressure started. It did not take that country, even though it meant a violation of our airspace, our territorial integrity, our sovereignty, our everything. It did not take that nation more than a week to go in, pick their person, kill the kidnappers, and take off.
Well, some people say that the operation was conducted on our soils with our knowledge, awareness, but maybe that's face saving. Okay, so we have another headline here that requires quite some attention. Insecurity, Ekiti to recruit more forest guards. Now, on our last show on Monday, we informed that the Edo state government has decided to put acting heads of local government councils and also traditional leaders of different communities to the task as regards tackling the menace of kidnapping in Edo state. In that particular effort, at resolving the whole question of kidnapping of citizens in Edo state, they say they had given the traditional rulers 10 days to make sure that criminal headers and other people who were occupying forests within the state vacate those places. And that at the expiry of the 10 days, traditional leaders would have to be held to account if in the event of any kidnapping in their communities. So this is about efforts being made at the level of the state government, which is incorporating the grassroots leaders into their whole the efforts at fighting back this menace of kidnapping. And today this story has taken us to Ekiti State. So the question is, what is the Ekiti State doing? Let's bring you some more details about that headline. So yesterday, the report of a 6-month survey of 31 cultural sites in Ekiti State, carried out by a team led by Dr. Babajide Agbola and staff of the state's Forestry Commission, was submitted to the governor of the state, Mr. Kayode Fayemi. The report was received by the chairman Ekiti State Forestry Commission, Mr. Kayode Olaosebikong, in Ado Ekiti. The report contained measures to make the forests in Ekiti State uninhabitable for kidnappers and bandits, and also to check illegal logging activities. The representative of the governor revealed that part of the measures include the recruitment of more forest guards. Let me read some of what he is quoted to have said. He said, "The government is not unaware of the dreaded activities being perpetrated by some criminals in the forests. Efforts are being geared up to arrest the situation. The State Forestry Commission already has a proposal which will be approved soon. We want to hire more guards to safeguard our forests against insecurity and illegal lumbering that can endanger our people and our economy." He added, and I quote, "As part of our strategies, we are giving licenses to loggers to fell mature trees in our forest reserves so that when the criminals know that activities are on there, they will flee." Again, the senior special assistant to the governor of Ekiti State on Environment, Dr. Akinyemi Akinyua, said, "Most of the security threats happening around us, that is us in Ekiti, are done in the forests across the states where the bandits take their victims to." So you can see from this development that the Ekiti State has profiled the locales, the hotbeds, the red zones as far as banditry, kidnapping, terrorism are concerned, and they have come to the conclusion that the forests are actually the red zones. So they have developed a strategy, the use of forest guards. To what extent do you think, Dr. Noel, this is going to be helpful?
It's going to be effective to the extent to which the newly recruited local guards and all that are equipped with communication equipment. Because you see somebody, you notice illegal movement or unusual movement in and around the forest area where you are assigned to. You should be able to convey that immediately to an agency that should be responding. And at the same time, that agency that should be responding should also have the capacity to come against those people immediately. So response time, that is observe, report, and response time are therefore critical ingredients here. Now, but what the beauty of this is that the local person knows the local environment.
Yes.
So in that case, you are adopting what I would call an inclusive, participatory, but dissuasive mode in coming after brigandry. So that is quite good. But then persons without equipment are no use against a sophisticated enemy. So we should, therefore should be a related value chain and chain of actions involving newly recruited people, properly recruited to identify and note incidents of unusual movement, report that immediately, and then a rapid deployment force will come up immediately and attack the situation before the perpetrators of infamy settle in and become a nuisance to the community. So equip them, train them, arm them, and then have a standby response team that will act on the information that they provide.
Father Duniya, constantly we have said on this show that the security agency that is the proper agency that should be tasked and is actually tasked with countering these insecurity challenges is actually the police. So the forestry guards cannot do so much unless they are also trained on how to interface with the police properly, so that intelligence is shared properly, is gathered properly, and then responses from the police who at the moment are licensed to carry arms and use them for the protection of citizens, respond promptly.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very true, Father Robert. The police are statutorily saddled with the responsibility of internal security. But like you know, and it's common knowledge, the police is not just overstretched in this country. We also have a situation where, as it were, the country is so verse, and that the workforce that we have cannot penetrate the nook and crannies. And that gap has been capitalized upon for the kind of violence that we see raging all over the place. And that has given birth to this conversation on state police and all other as supportive agencies that must support the police. But I think a greater issue is that even within the conventional state police apparatus, I hope you know even the immigration is police of some form and all of those. Mm-hmm. They have a very big gap even in terms of managing information and cooperating amongst themselves. So bringing this third party, this third layer in the forest guards, I wonder, we already see the tension sometimes between the Amotekun in that part of the country, southwest, and the police conflicting on issues of who has been arrested, whether there were times Amotekun had come out to say, you know what, we took these people to the police and the police say no, you know, and they are not seen to be on the same page. So I agree with you that cooperation and collaboration is very important. But if within and amongst the statutory agency of government, they can't even communicate well and collaborate well, let us hope we proceed with faith. Mm.
Okay, we'll proceed with faith. By the way, faith is what we it's a staple. We eat faith here, we talk faith, we live faith here. I hope it's not blind faith anyway. Okay, Father Duniya, you were looking at a headline dealing with world population.
Yes. Monday, precisely 11th of July, was World Population Day. And a big headline coming out of that day celebration is that world population is billed to hit 8 billion by November.
This year.
And you would agree with me that issues of population have been issues that are very directly connected to matters of development since the times of the likes of Thomas Malthus and many of them. Is a big issue in development theories today. And that itself gives the necessity to control population, like we have argued in very clear professional cycles, especially because population must be meaningful in terms of providing the basics and ensuring security, safety, and every other thing. Purposeful living, if you may put it at that. And there are some of the highlights coming out from that headline that COVID has taken down or killed about over 6 million of the world's population. We have today over 100 million who have been forcibly displaced either on account of violence, persecution, climate change, or some form of marginalizations here and there. We have also some pushback against women, against women's rights that continues to threaten the lives, the dignity, the freedom, the welfare of women and a girl child everywhere around the world. And we also have the big hit that talks about the 8 billion that is being anticipated by November this year. But more than that too is the fact that putting all together, some Nigerian medical doctor and policy analyst, Julian Ojebo, was quoted to have said, the resultant effect of increase in population means that the need for food, water, housing, energy, healthcare, transportation, and other resources will rise as the population grows. And all that consumption increases, the likelihood of major catastrophe like pandemics, increase in conflict, and degradation of environment. Now, I think Julian Ojebo has captured the core issues. Once there is a rise in population, there will always be a rise in demand, the demand of the basics of life. And it is worse off in this part of the world, and even more complicated in a country like ours, that first is very low on keeping statistics. I hardly wonder if we have statistics. Two, because we don't have statistics, I doubt if we can ever plan effectively. There is a direct connection between proper planning and policies that will really serve the need of society and statistics. Then we are talking about already we are laid back in terms of our infrastructures, our ability to cope with even the population that we have. And I hardly wonder if so much is being said about population control in this country and in this part of the world. So, while the bigger globe is afraid, even for countries that have planned their population of what is to come, those of us who are on even the darker side of the slope are slipping away. So, Dr. Noel, I don't know if you have something for us in this respect.
One has to be very, very careful because one comes from a culture where childbearing is seen as the primary gift from God. In fact, when you decode my name, my surname, it betrays that overemphasis on childbearing, and which is what drives this population growth. Because
that is Ihebuzor.
Ihebuzor, but it's a short form.
Okay.
The Catholic priest couldn't cope with it very long. when he was registering my father.
Okay.
Because the name is Ihebuzor Joge Onwa. The first thing that you ask for, you ask somebody when you meet him, is, how are your children? So it means that there's this subtle cultural pressure on everybody to produce, and we actually are doing better than even the Jews in response to the biblical exhortation to increase and multiply and, and possess the earth. Now, the thing is, there are 9 offending countries in the world who drive this population growth. They are known, most of them fall into a group called E9 countries. And these E9 countries, Nigeria, DRC, China, Bangladesh, and all that, have one thing that links them: high levels of illiteracy, high levels of male dominance, high levels of unemployment, and great urban-rural divide, and increasingly a migration towards urban centers. Now, what has happened in the 20th century was that we came into what I will call death control, and we were able to control the number of people dying. I mean, today I'm 70, I'm pushing to 71. In the past, I'd exceeded Nigeria's life expectancy.
Yes.
It was about 54, 57. But people are living longer now. And because of increased healthcare provisions, more children are also coming into the world. Infant mortality is declining. Maternal mortality is, even though it is still high, is still under control. When you combine decrease in death and increase in survival of children, what happens is that population now starts growing. And as populations grow, they put pressure on resources. They put pressure on resources. And what they put pressure on resources, there's a concept in ecology known as carrying capacity. before long, you exceed your carrying capacity. And then when you exceed your carrying capacity, which is a compendium of both emotional, social, economic, technological things, you find katakata will burst in that country. And this is what's happening. So more children will mean more food eating. More food eating will mean a decline in ability to produce food and will drive up the price of food. When the price of food goes up, it means that there's a decline in ability of the poor to cope. And in some other countries, what happens is that there is then a social protection policy that kicks in immediately and identifies people who should be protected from poverty. We don't have that in Nigeria. So we have all the ingredients for doom. And this was why, even though Malthus wrote in the 19th century, his predictions are going to come true in Nigeria unless we do something about this. Unless we have, one, a good handle on our population. We have a good handle on plans, development plans, and we have a good handle on monitoring the implementation of those development plans. If you go to Nigeria, if you're in Nigeria here, there's a surplus of planning. What is in short supply is capacity to follow through those plans. Governments plan anything they want to plan. They give you whatever, it's what I would call not rational planning. It's called, I call it faith-based planning. Inshallah, God willing. The Latin form is Deus voluntate. If God wills, if Allah will provide. Please let us leave what is God's work for God. And let us also identify the part that human beings can play and not go and overlabor God with things where we are clearly at fault and not doing what we should do.
I think,
okay.
I think on this note you ended, I want to bring something that's very vital, because in this, in our faith angle, we still talk about responsible parentage.
Yes.
And that progresses on one premise, that you don't give birth to children that you know you don't have what it takes to cater for them, be it resources, be it presence in terms of grooming and ensuring that they turn out responsible citizens who are efficient and well taken care of. So I think sometimes we stretch this faith thing, if it pleases God, if it whatever. No, sometimes it is even a misinterpretation of the categories of faith.
And that precisely, Father Duniya, that's what I'm saying. That there are errors that men make and who they shift over to God.
Quite true.
I mean, you have to measure, family size should be something that is planned and effected with diligence and with an eye on resources. Can you train these children? Can you give them a good education? Can you give them good shelter? Can you give them a good head start in life? And well, if the answer is maybe or no, perhaps you should then find a way to control population, your population growth. And that is a delicate issue, because fertility management comes across as being family planning. No, it's responsible parenting, responsible use of the human body, and knowing that you don't bring children into the world to make them suffer. Now, what is happening here? If you look at Abuja, my brothers, you find the transport system here is unable to cope with the population. Abuja was planned for a certain population, but right now the population has grown beyond it. And that's what explains all these pressures. Pressure on land, pressure on building, pressure on anything. That's what explains it. And so what we have to do is to come back, talk to ourselves and sit down and say, how shall we plan for the next 10 years? What population size do we need? China saw this problem some years back and went on an aggressive policy of trying to make sure that that optimum population was not exceeded, and that the population that they had was such that the resources available in the country and the development plans and industries could carry, feed, nurture, and look after that population. It was only after they had succeeded in stabilizing the economy and then getting the right industrial growth going that they increased the band to say you can have 2 children.
And I also think that another aspect of these demographics that relates directly to security would be the interaction between the rural and the urban in places like Abuja. So Abuja was supposed to be, at least in the metropolis, an urban settlement. But you see, insecurity challenges in places like Kaduna, Niger, Benue, Bauchi, Maiduguri, different other places, these challenges have forced people to leave those places and come and settle in Abuja. Abuja being considered the safest place in Nigeria. Now, when you look at places like Dutse Alhaji, you look at places like Piakasa, Kabusa, Nyanya, Karushi, these places are already becoming overpopulated. Why is that? People are coming into the FCT especially for opportunities and also to be safe from the insecurity challenges they face in other places. But as these people are coming in, they are going into territories within the FCT that have not been planned.
True.
So you don't have government presence there. You don't have the presence of security agents. You don't have roads. You don't have facilities. Even there are no streets. If you go to places like Dutse, Alhaji, Papi, Kabusa, you don't have streets in many of those places.
Very true.
And all of these things are going to constitute some forms of pressure. By 2017, the FCT had entered the 4th phase of development, and Kabusa is supposed to be part at the center of that 4th phase of development. But if you go to Kabusa now, there are no roads. There are no hospitals. So what do you do when the population, the rural settlements are becoming mixed up with urban settlements? Sunnyvale Estate, for instance, shares borders with some rural settlements in Kabusa. Lokogoma, you have Lokodogoma this side, you have Kabusa that side. If you go to Papi, as you're climbing up the hill, you'll see fantastic, good buildings there. But just after those estates that are coming up, you have the rural settlements. So those who are living in urban shelters know that they now have those in rural shelters with them. And what that means is something we cannot begin to be saying now.
No, Father, you know, the thing is that whenever I see this type of thing in Abuja, what comes to my mind is the opening lines of Alan Paton's Cry the Beloved Country. It says there's a road that goes into Ixipo. It is lovely beyond the singing of it. But then you see, the author seduces you, and you're looking at the beauty of the road, and he says, but on the other side, existing next to it is mass urban poverty. And what defines this poverty? Intense habitation of limited space. What causes this intense habitation of limited space? Population growth and expansion and explosion. And it's creeping into Abuja. And what we need is a policy that allows local governments to become also viable centers of development. What we need is a policies that create an incentive to industrialists to challenge them to go to those rural areas and implant their industries. Even if it means giving them tax havens for a few years. When you do that, you reverse the trend, the rush to Abuja, the rush to Enugu, the rush to Lagos. And then secondly, the security apparatus needs to be beefed up. I don't know why government needs people to tell it this. You don't concentrate all of your security things within Abuja here and expect the people to stay in rural centers and just sit idle. I was in Owerri the other day, and there was a meeting of one of the units of the security agencies in this country, and the place was overrunning. Every street, every inch of the town was virtually crawling with armed personnel, with heavy machine guns mounted on their jeeps and all that. Now, that is enough to scare anybody, any terrorist and all that. But it only lasts for the period that the guys are there. And then they said, and it's quite deceptive. For that week, there might not be any crime, any abduction in that place. And then a facile commentator will come and say, insecurity is declining. You know, and you say, has your commentary taken into consideration the context? No. So on this population issue, what we need clearly is we need to start growing in our economy. Our economy has not been growing at the right rate. And disaster happens when your rate of economic growth is inferior to the rate of your population growth. I think we're growing at about 1.35 or whatever. Population is growing at about 6-7%. So once there's that, what the French call décalage between rate of economic development and population growth, is disaster. You are cutting disaster and you'll get it.
Father Duniya, talk more disaster.
That we have on one of our headlines or side stories reported that man fakes own kidnap to swindle parents 8 million, reported by the Daily Trust. The incident took place in Olodo Amala area of Abeokuta North local government area. The suspect is a 54-year-old man identified as Dauda Bello, and the victim is 74-year-old Mrs. Mesisi Adisa. The victim left home on Wednesday, 8th of June, and never returned. The suspect was arrested on Thursday, July 7th. Yesterday, the police spokesman Abimbola Oyeyemi briefed journalists on findings from their investigation. He is quoted to have said, "The suspect was subsequently arrested and taken into custody for investigation. On interrogation, the suspect confessed to have known the victim for quite some time and that they were both in the business of children trafficking. He, the suspect, stated further that he invited the victim on that fateful day to discuss their usual business, but that on getting to his house, he discovered that the victim came with what he thought was a huge amount of money. This made him to hit the woman on the head with a stick, which made the woman to be unconscious, after which he carried the unconscious body to the victim to the bush, where he sniffed life out of her. He confessed further that when he searched the woman's body, he discovered that she only had the sum of 22,200 with her, which he took with disappointment. Having realized that his aim of getting such money from the victim was in vain, he decided to cut off her wrists and ankles, which he claimed to have sold to somebody who is now at large. Wow. Stories like this are quite devastating.
It just tells you the morass we've descended into in this country. We, at a first level, are complaining about the materialism, and then suddenly we've got so low that we almost like, well, worse than animals, because animals kill to eat. The lion doesn't kill if it's had a good feed. One of the things I noticed when I went on safari in Kenya was that the lion, if it's well fed, it will bypass herds of animals that it normally eats, it will just leave them and be lying there, they will go past. But human beings are now turning and killing just for the sake of killing for 22,000 naira. What have we become? And then cutting off people's hands
to go and
sell. And then the whole traffic actually just tells me we have our morals have so much atrophied that we need redemption from ourselves. Because when eventually you finish this thing, you'll come back and eat yourself now.
Dr. Noel, if you sell human hands, you know, very often you read news headlines and you are told a dead body was found and found dismembered.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the privates are missing, sometimes the hands. What do they do with these parts?
They sell them to people who wrongly believe that those parts actually have a capacity to attract wealth. So if you cut off the hand, if you cut off the privates, if you cut off some other and a number of other parts, and you give them to people that the buyer believes that if he has that in his possession, that he would have quick access to wealth, quick access to money and all that. So that's what drives it. So it's materialism now being compounded by a death of morals. Because you're now saying the human being becomes an instrument in death for making you rich on this earth you've despised the person from. And I think it's such a shame. When Tanzania, we had a challenge like this. People with challenges in their skin pigmentation were being killed because it was felt that people like that, albinos, that they were set apart. They were very close to the gods, and that if you killed them, you had money. And so we had to, in the UN, we had to mount a campaign to protect them because they were being killed for money.
Yes. So,
and that is something we did there. Now here, you now find people becoming spare parts. The dealing is you spare part, and apart when you now you see a car spare part dealer, you want to ask the person, your own spare part, is it human parts or what? It's such a shame, really.
It's a shame.
It's
really.
a shame, and a shame on those who do this.
Yes.
Shame on all the people who are linked with it. I mean, there was a time the politicians were getting bad press because it was said that it was politicians. I want to believe it's not politicians. I want to believe that this sickness of the mind affects just people who have lost control of all decency, of all humanity, of everything that is good. And may God save them from themselves and and may God save us from them too.
Barrister John Awakalu has arrived just the nick of time. We are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll dive right into our discussion on politics, peace, and security. Please stay with us. Radio Maria 91.3 FM. You have been listening to Side by Side. And now we shall begin our discussion on politics, peace, and security. Again, our guests in the studio are Dr. Noel Ihebuzor and Mr. John Awakalu Esquire. Let's begin with the whole essence of politics, Dr. Kalu. What is politics about, ideally? You know, people sometimes when you talk to them about politics, say, I am not a politician. I am not a politician. And yet, Plato tells us that man is a political being, you know. So what is politics really about? So that people do not shy away from it and they have a proper grasp of what it is we are discussing.
Yes, politics, it deals with question of power. And power has to do with everything about human being, including economics, commerce, trade, industry, inventions, everything. Because whoever controls political power determines how these things go, how they flow, their direction. If you see somebody who is in charge of the political authority of a particular entity, the growth of that entity is a function of the person that controls the political power of that entity, directly proportional. So that if it is somebody who doesn't care about whether there is meaningful development or not, whether there is security, whether lives are safe, whether lives are meaningful in terms of their quality of living, he doesn't care, then you find that that country or that entity will be in shambles. Everything just goes. There will be no order. There will be nothing to write home about concerning that entity. So politics is very critical in every human endeavor. You say, oh, I'm a businessman, I'm just concerned about my business. You do your business and put your 100 containers in a day, and the man with political power feels threatened. Just a policy statement, he signs it. All those your 100 containers will leave your hand, and there is nothing you can do about it. You can only cry and curse, but there is nothing you can do about it. But if you had shown interest in politics, either by directly getting involved or directly getting people who can ensure that your interest is protected, are put in place. When those people are in place, when the man wants to come up with, they can be able to say no, and they will discuss it. At the end of the day, everybody's interest is protected. So politics is very crucial. It's not something we should shy away from. Even right from heaven, it has always been a critical yeah, but true.
I agree with you.
It's been critical.
You know, whenever Barrister Awakalu is in the studio, we always get something. You missed out on the other day when he told us that in the Garden of Gethsemane, the apostles of Jesus were gathered there, and Peter took care to bring his knife with him. that was a prayer ground.
what was the weapon doing in the prayer ground?
Anyway, I think I agree with you substantially. Politics, they say, is about power. I agree. It's about governance, who gets what at the end of the day, and policy programs and all whatnot, which everybody should get involved with. So, besides the side that brought the laughter, I think.
Well, it's interesting to know that when you have a politician with political power, he can, with just the stroke of his pen, change someone's destiny. Change the fortunes of a whole family.
That's true.
Change the future of a whole community.
That's true.
And even determine the fate of a whole nation.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Which means everybody who is interested in their well-being, in the well-being of their family, in the well-being of their community, their village, their state, and their country, must take interest in politics, whether the person is a clergyman or not. And there are really various levels of taking interest in politics. Some take this interest by way of what we are doing here, doing analysis, political commentaries, offering up opinions and suggestions on how the polity can be better. Others do that by contesting for offices, being voted into offices, and therefore driving policies that affect the common good. Others do that by writing in newspapers. And the social media is also another word of political participation. But everyone must realize that whether you are interested in politics or not, politics affect everybody. And whether you participate in it or not, politics will participate in you.
Definitely.
Definitely. Very true. You know, the quintessential nature of politics is such that politics determines who we are and how we will be seen and known, even on world global stage. Today we complain of insecurity. We complain of failing economy. But you see, all of these things are like we used to say in diplomacy. The strength a country wields on global war stage is directly tied to the strength of her armory. Today we are almost victims of criminals in our country because our politicians either have refused to fund our security outfits or they have decided to play dirty games with how our security outfits should be managed. After all, our president today, even if he was a former general, is a president as a civilian, and we call him the commander-in-chief. So if we decide to dissociate with the reality of how important these decisions are, don't forget, very central to it is allocation of resources, which now tells us where we head for in the next couple of years. Whether we remain backward or we make some progress is about the allocation of resources, judicious monitoring of those resources, and placing square pegs in square holes and round pegs in round holes. And where politics confuses all of these, we find ourselves in a very deep pit like we are suffering today. So the imperative to get politics right. So to that extent, I think I agree with all of us that we must get involved in politics. Maybe I should switch over to Dr. Noel. Now, politics as it were. This interest must be national, it must be ethnic, it must be religious, it must be regional as it is in the country, Nigeria today. So, I don't know what you have to tell us about how you think this interest should be driven in order to give us a reasonable balance in terms of charting a future for this country that is wholesome and that all of us can be proud of.
Okay, yes, thank you. I agree largely with what Carlo has said, the lawyer has said. For me, I look at politics from its root, its Latin root, polis, which is the city-state. And the whole conception there was, how do you organize a space containing individuals with the resources it has to maximize the best returns for the greatest number of people? So it was the concept of what the Catholics took over and made summum bonum and all that then got englobed into politics. Now it means that but societies are made up of people, first of all individuals, then families, and then perhaps groups, and then associations and all that. And each of these groupings would have something it wants to pursue. That thing it wants to pursue is what we would call interest. Yes. And the societies are harmonious to the extent that you can reconcile interest, and that the interests are not pulling in such opposing directions that they want to create a situation known as anomy. So that is what good societies are. Now, in developing economies like ours, even though for the past 40 years we've been calling ourselves developing, but we should actually be saying developed economies if we had got it right now. What are the interests? There's a common interest, which is peace and security. There's also another, a more overriding interest, which is global overall development for everybody. And as the SDGs have shown, there is also a greater interest, which is inclusive development for everybody. So that you leave nobody behind, as they say in the SDGs. Leave no one behind. Now, what is happening is that we have now fractionated into conflicting interest groups. And the people are now using means, short methods, long methods, and all of that. And what we now have is a perverse and corrupted definition of politics, where politics now becomes the use of force and trickery and crookery and all that to yield specific interests for specific populations of the same. And then which also expects that people in that society, the others in that society will just remain like this and become like Lookman. Just a look.
Which one is Lookman again?
Lookman is when you they look now. When
okay, so don't they look.
I mean, if your work is just to they look, your name is Lookman now. So and you expect others. I mean, the height of politics, of neutral developmental politics, is seen in the statement, I belong to no one, and no one belongs to me. That is, I'm here to serve everybody. Okay? Now, what is perverted politics is now policy situations, policy formulation that privilege a particular group at the expense of the other group. When you do that, please don't expect the other groups that have been denied part of the public communion, that have been excluded, to sit down and just they look like Lookman. They will act, they will contest, they would protest. Now, what we then need now in Nigeria is a politics, as Carlo has said, governed by policy enunciations that favor the greatest number of the greatest people. And that would then mean to say there are interests that are overriding in everywhere. Decent jobs, decent location of industries, decent creation of living locations, decent connection through roads, decent provision of facilities for life and property, and that these things should be so done that even if you're in Port Harcourt or you're in Karanamoda, you have an access to these things. Where problems start, and then the other part of it is, Igbo people say that if you're not there when your yam is being roasted, your yam stays by the side of the fire.
Oh, sure. That is deep.
No,
and doesn't get roasted.
It doesn't get roasted. It doesn't get roasted. It will then.
You have to be there.
You have to be there. So if we are 30 that have yams to roast, and you make it only 15 of us are there to roast yams, you are telling the other 15 that their yams will get stalled and stale, and please, they will contest. And part of this yam roasting metaphor applies to the distribution of public offices. And that is why in governance, issues like equity and fair-handedness come into play. When you now say, I'm not for everybody, and yet your position is showing that you are appointing for some people, you lose credibility. And nothing is bad for a politician than to lose credibility, because what you're now doing is you're saying, this group I'm leading, they're so credulous that they'll believe everything I tell them. But credulity in people, in populations that have questions, is in short supply. They won't believe you. They will say, oh boy, as they say it in Delta, man, I where they cry this year. I where they cry. Don't say because I'm crying, I'm not seeing you. So what we need is a policy that recognizes the different divergent groups which we call interests in this country, that unites those interests, and that makes sure that everybody is there at the table where the bread will be baked, and that when the bread is baked by everybody, that everybody is also at the table when the bread is shared. That is what is missing in this country.
I think I will direct some questions. Thank God we have a legal luminary in the studio this morning. Does our law, the constitution we operate today, in the 1999 constitution as amended, does it support this equity, fairness? Because one of the biggest accusations to that document of our collective existence and whatever says that it is lopsided and has given room to this kind of lopsided politics, extricating one part of the country and giving undue advantage to the other. How would you speak to that?
Yeah, the point is that, as the Honorable Doctor has said, our Constitution makes enough provision for equity and inclusiveness. It provided for federal character, which ensures that in every action of government, that it takes into account the interest of the component parts of the country, harmonize it, so that everybody will be carried along and everybody will own that policy and the project that come out of that policy. The Constitution provides for that in Chapter 2 of the Constitution and in various other provisions of the Constitution. So our problem in Nigeria is not the dearth of legislation. It's not the absence of appropriate legislations to ensure that things are properly done. But the problem we'll have is in the persons who implement these legislations and do a perverted implementation of it. So that's where the problem is. So yes, somehow the Constitution also shortchanged Nigerians in terms of ensuring equity and equality. Politics is based on population, on numbers. They say it's a game of numbers. Now, and there is an institution of government that is saddled with coming up with the figure, the number of Nigerians there are for the purpose of allocation of resources. Now, when you have in the Constitution a provision that if there should be a census and that census result is out, it is first given to Mr. President. Mr. President looks at it. Once he says, I don't like this figure, all the commissioners resign. They will all resign. That's the provision of the Constitution. And what does that mean? If I am the president and I appoint you commissioners in the Population Commission, and then there is to be done a census, you must bring out figures that will impress me, that will make me happy. That means even if my village ordinarily is a population of 1,000 or 10,000 people, and you come up with 10 or 20 million people in that village, I will shake your hands, I will like it, and I will approve the listing. But once it doesn't come out that way, and I say, look, gentlemen, I don't like this figure, that's the end of your job. That's constitutional provision. And that provision has made it difficult that it's not been very easy for any Southerner to conduct census population. When Obasanjo was there, yes, there was attempts. Jonathan, they never allowed it. It never happened. And today, we are talking of holding census next year in the midst of an election.
In fact, a pilot exercise is underway in Anambra State.
It's already ongoing. Now, at the end of the day, they come up with a report that must please Mr. President in order to retain their job, because they must provide food for their families. So that's the unfortunate thing about what the Constitution did to us. If the Constitution had made census in such a way that the operators of that commission has a free hand to do and bring out a figure that can stand empirical analysis. But if you do that,
let me take you on the federal character thing. The federal character, as provided in the Constitution, some will argue is not on all levels. I think it is mandatory for the appointment of ministers. For other appointments, I think the president is expected to do that based on his conscience, because we've seen the present president say, this is the person I trust. It's about trust. It's not as incumbent, because it is when it is justiciable, like in the case of a minister, a state can go and say, you know what, among the ministers appointed, none representing my state, and it can be a basis of litigation. But in other cases, other appointments too, it is left to the moral conscience of,
like appointment of service chiefs, right?
Service chiefs, executive secretary, and in the same way and manner, it is allowed to be applied remotely. And you and I know, when it comes to power, acquisition of power, and exercise of power in this country, we've not had politicians who are politically matured to be left to their consciences. And I think, let me give you some statement that is accredited in an online publication accredited to Babachir Lawal over the Muslim ticket, when he tries to say something about his good friend Tinubu and how he felt he goofed. And this was what he said: Muslim presidential candidate, Lagos; Muslim vice presidential candidate, Borno; Muslim national chairman, Nasarawa; Muslim deputy national chairman, Borno; Muslim president sitting now, Katsina; Muslim senate president, Yobe; Muslim speaker, Lagos; Muslim deputy speaker, Plateau. And you and I know that religion cannot be put to the side. It's a big factor in this country. And at a time when our country is most vulnerable from these sentiments of religion, this is playing out. Sometimes the Constitution is brought on the sideline and brushed, and the feelings you get is simply that this does not make it incumbent on us. The place categorically where it is said it has to go by this representation is basically on issues of ministers, mostly. Besides that, there are board appointments. There are a lot of parastatals and agencies that people are appointed to, heads of major organizations or units of government. I don't think those are made as definite in the Constitution. Don't you think that itself constitutes some problems for a maturing politics?
Like I said, the federal character principle enshrined in the Constitution is sufficient in itself to ensure equity and inclusiveness in governance in Nigeria. However, the operators of the Constitution are where the problem lies. Today, on issue of ministers, outside of the federal character, there is a provision specifically made that every state in Nigeria must produce at least a minister. Now, if every state must produce a minister, and you now have some designated minister and some minister of state junior to the minister, then is any state junior to the other? These are some of the questions. Before, it was, before, their salaries used to be different. The minister earned more than the minister of state, until the Revenue Mobilization and Allocation Commission, Fiscal Commission, stepped in and said no. Since the Constitution provided that each state And whether you call him Minister of State or Minister of what, they are all ministers representing their respective states. So every of that thing must be equal. That was done under Obasanjo regime, and it was the tail end of his regime. It was implemented. Now, but outside of that, the principle, the federal character principle, is intended to ensure that Nigerians, government, in making decisions, even at local government level, should take into account that there are about 10 or 20 villages that constitute the local government. And then in making your appointment, you at least make sure, if you cannot get the 10 and 20 of them involved, at least the majority of them involved at a particular point in time. At other time, the ones that were not involved before gets involved, so that everybody has that sense of belonging. How do you explain the fact that in admissions to schools, somebody, if it is secondary school, unity school, somebody from Anambra has to score 300 or 200 or up to 300 to get admitted, and then somebody from Yobe will score 2, and they say they rationalize it on basis of federal character principle to accommodate every district. But when it now comes to the major appointments, they tell you no, it is at the discretion of the president or whoever that is in charge. It is just manipulation. A refusal to abide and implement the spirit of the law. That is just what it is. So the law is sufficient if implemented. And again, the reason it is like this is because in Nigeria here, yes, we have political parties. What do they stand for? Nothing in terms of ideology, in terms of how to get things done. It is Mr. A who has been elected, maybe president or governor. Anything that fancies him, that's the way the party now goes to pursue his fancy. Not what the party itself as a collective believes or sets out to achieve. So until we go back to a situation where political parties are the drivers of policy, where political parties are the ones in charge and not necessarily the person elected into office in the name of the political party, so that the person elected is there to implement the policies of the party, not his own personal fancies. Until we get to that level, we'll continue to have what we have around us. Then on the issue of Muslim ticket, which you have alluded, and the statement by Baba Chilawa, I must say that is unfortunate. Yes, the Constitution did not say Christian Muslim must pay. It didn't say so. But the Constitution recognized that we have diversities in religion and said there shall be no state religion adopted. Nigeria shall be secular. Now, for you to ensure harmony, for you to ensure a statement we have always used to console ourselves, free, the freest election, because it never was. If that election had been made to stand, you would have seen the litigation that would have followed it, that would have led to the court itself annulling it, disqualifying Abiola, and not at the same time qualifying Tofa. So, because people were in a hurry, wanted whatever it is, anyhow, let's push the military out, we were ready to accept anything. It wasn't because the election was free as it's being counted today. No, I participated in that election for House of Rep in 1991. I participated in that process. So we know what happened. But because there was need to push the military aside, we had to agree and say, okay, for us it is good. Let's
Anything, for as long as the military goes.
But it doesn't mean that it represents the best for the country. No. It never at any time was the best for the country. Even then people complained. If you go back to the papers of those days, you see the complaints about the Muslim ticket.
Thank you very much. And I think I will come back to Dr. Noel. I will continue from where our learned brother just stopped. While I was on my way here in the taxi, I heard some commentator talking over the radio, citing the Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe and Professor Uche Ezekwelu in the First Republic, and then I think Awolowo and is it Dr. Philip from Anambra State as having flown a Christian ticket and all whatnot, and then added to the ticket. Given the kind of division that we have experienced since the last 7 years, can we say it is exactly the same kind of sentiment? He has just alluded to the fact that at that time, the Abiola Tofa ticket was just a situation of the time. We just wanted the military to pack and go. And now, we are not in the threat of any military. We are supposed to be progressing democratically and harmoniously too. But that harmony has not been seen. So much allegations against this regime on being sectional, on driving Islamic agenda. In fact, even the attempt to tame this terrorism that is raging in the country, the present regime has been accused of giving a backup to these people. So is this a time that that kind of a ticket should even be thought of, not even to talk of put in place for Nigeria?
I think that policies and choices, good policies and good choices are context sensitive.
Good.
And if you ignore the context, you'll miss it. I mean, if we were like the UK or like America, and there was a presidential election, one would be free to choose his running mate, irrespective of ideology, religion, class, and all that. The thing would be what ideology on the running mate best aligned with current trends in the country. Trump, for instance, saw that there was a tendency towards right-wing revivalism, popularism, and all, populist ideologies and all that. And because of the emphasis, the vote-catching capacity of right-wing movements, that's why Pence was a very good candidate. Because Pence appealed to that revival of religious fundamentalism that was taking grip in
conservatism.
That was taking grip in America. But then we now come to a country like ours where issues of creed and breed have come to dominate politics in this country. The first question I ask you is, where are you from? Second question is that what's your faith? In that our situation, I think it was grossly insensitive for anybody to go for a Muslim ticket. It would have been also insensitive for somebody to go for a Christian ticket. It would have also been stupid for anybody to go for an animist ticket, if such a thing was possible. So I think it was a mistake, and I also think it's a bit insulting to the intelligence of the average Nigerian for somebody now to say, oh, start coming up with spurious arguments, hacking into the past. Oh, it was done under Abiola and Tofa. It was done under Azikiwe. And for God's sake, Azikiwe was prime minister. Azikiwe was never president. He was president, but then that was a ceremonial presidency. Do you understand? It's different. It's different from a president of a country. Yeah. The function of a president in that type of situation is different from the function of a president. Yes. So I think it's stretching the ability of Nigerians to be fooled a bit too far to assume that Nigerians would be happy with this. But then, as I normally would do, I sit back and I ask myself, why was this decision taken? Why did Tinubu, who has shown so far to be a very nimble politician, why did he decide to do this? And the answer is simple. He was looking for votes. He believes that Shetima will bring the vote from Borno State, and as well as from a broad swathe and the northwest and north central. That's the whole logic, and that it is therefore possible to insult the religious sensitivities of a large number of Nigerians and violate what has become normal practice and convention in Nigeria at in the interest of getting the votes. I hope he gets in the vote. But there's a message, there's an underlying message here. The underlying message is, let a principle of numbers or meritocracy reign. Let's now finish this and then say, okay, for appointments for places in unity schools, let the best number or the number that will win the highest number of credits enter. What the hypocrisy of Nigeria is that we selectively apply things as suit us. So when somebody tells you, as the PDP said, when it was convenient for them, that they don't believe in zoning, and they believe in excellence also. Even though their constitution has zoning. Yes, yes. When the PDP came up and just because they were looking for a way to pander to somebody, I tell myself, fair enough. When this is all done and dusted, we will now come and say, okay, we don't believe in zoning, so let us not also zone appointments. Let's also govern. Let appointments be governed on the best performing candidate. But that is why you'll notice the program. No. It can't happen. Let entry into the unity schools be governed by high school. No. Let entry into the Nigerian Defense Academy be governed on the base. If there are 300 places, let it be that the first 300 goes in. You'll find the same people who supported this argument come back to say, no, you can't do this. And that is the tragedy of Nigeria, that we're not consistent. We rather have policies that suit us, and because we pursue policies that suit us, we tend to miss the boat. Okay, let me just give you the good news. Our producer has graciously added 10 minutes to the show. That means we have 15 minutes to go. So let me just open the line so that as the discussion continues, our listeners can also call in and be part of the conversation. You can reach us on 081-084-47518. Again, you can call to be part of the conversation on 081-084-47518. Please, when you call, try to be brief so that other callers can also have a say. Okay, we have a first caller. Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Your name and where you're calling from, please.
My name is Jamil.
Jamil from Uche. Please go ahead.
Yes, my yes.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, you have discussed a number of issues, but on the last one, yes, you have shot himself from the book to the fact that even the right thinking person from Muslim right thinkers, have said no. Because considering the situation in the country, we are not yet like where people can vote, talk less of repeating or we are not yet there. Therefore, there should be justice. We have majority Christians as the situation has been practiced for a long period of time. We should have peace with that. But for the fact that his, average of fall from the majority Muslim north, he has no option to, pick somebody who is the Muslim. It's not that Shadima will give him vote for this particular son. No. The simple fact is that the majority of northern states are populated by the Muslims. And because of that, uncivilized and descendant of Muslims who are not yet designed to do away with religion and whatever. But because in the north we have all the best, who have experienced Christians, who are from that region, who can even fight for the position of the president. But the trust, the fear that, if someone religious is there, the interest will make who government is supposed to keep. But maybe non-elected that there should be some sensitization of Nigerians now, doing away with religion, ethnicity and what. I had one of the discussers there saying that this government or the president of the institution has been accused of invading terrorism or whatever. I think that is wrong assertion for the fact that nobody should even dare think that the president should be happy, but they are overwhelmed. It's very bad for elite and right thinkers to turn blind eyes on some fact that we know nobody in government, particularly a leader like sitting president will, support any insecurity while he's ruling, whoever it is. So we should not just, be dancing to the tune of those ignorant or those sentimental Nigerians who, probably, because of small things, will come blind and start pouring some lies and so on and so forth. The other time, just this week.
Okay.
When
Jamil. Unfortunately, our phone line is buzzing. So if you can just round up in 15 seconds so that another person can.
Thank you very much. Recently, just a few days ago, when the FCC wanted to segment the activities going on in some parts and so on, we know many criminals, many drug pushers using the past. But somewhere, some people are saying, "Oh, this man, the FCC minister, wanted to bring Sharia, that he wants to do away with fear and so on." This is just narrow-minded thinking. Whenever we are moving of governance, we should just be sentimental.
All right. The point has been the point has been sufficiently made, just so that other callers can also have a say. Thank you very much, Jamil from Wuse. And just to emphasize the fact that nobody here accused the sitting president or the government of siding. I think the statement that was made was there have been several accusations pointing towards the government in different directions. And one of those accusations that you hear branded here and there sometimes is that some elements within the government are aiding some of these evil acts. I think that was the point that was made. Okay, we have another caller. Hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
Morning.
Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
This is Clement from Gwarimpa.
Clement from Gwarimpa. Please kindly be brief. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm quite happy with the analysis of your case. At least they are trying enough. I'm quite impressed with the analysis. The fact is that APC in government, from time to time, they have proved that they have no regard for other religions. If not that they are mining, it's only Muslims. Let me just put it this way, APC is for Muslims.
Well, Jamil,
No, not
Clement from Gwarimpa, I don't think your assertion is quite right. The vice president of this country is APC and he's a pastor.
Okay, sorry, but I'm still
so APC is obviously not a Muslim party.
I'm sorry for that.
Thank you very much for acknowledging that. Go ahead.
But the reason is that in APC, like any other political party like PDP, we have a full number of Christians, we have a full number of Muslims. After what is from North and is a Muslim man, after he has ruled for 8 years, now they are saying that power will be rotating to the South. I can't even see a reason that South cannot, why there are a full number of Christians in the APC, if not manipulation, why still a Muslim from the South? And to make the matter worse, a Muslim from the South now still pick another Muslim from the North.
Okay, so if you're asking me to answer that question, I would say during the primaries, many of those Christian delegates from the South were the very ones who voted the Muslim. That's what democracy is about, you understand. People exercise their choices that way, and then all of us get to take responsibility for those choices. But thank you very much, Mr. Clement from Gwarimpa. Just so that we can take another caller. Thank you very much. Okay, we have another caller. Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
My name is Mr. Aliu. I'm calling from Abuja.
Mr. Aliu from Abuja. Please go ahead.
Yeah, the issue is this. If we are operating a one-party system, this issue of Christian-Muslim ticket would have been ideal because it's only one party that is there. You understand? Because every party should be represented, whether a Muslim, whether you're from the South, from the North, whatever sentiments you have, can now be considered in a one-party system. But when you have a multi-party system, 2 parties, 3 parties, 4 parties, you have the right to choose whichever that represents you very well. If there's a Muslim ticket, be quiet and just keep your religion. If you want to use religion as a tool in politics, keep your religion. Look at the party where Christians are represented. Vote for that party. If you're a Muslim and you feel that Islam is a tool you will use in democracy, in choosing your leader, look at a party where there's a Muslim or Muslim ticket, Muslim, whatever you want to choose, and choose. These are issues, sensitive issues that we should stay away from, because if we don't take time, very soon, some states will even start saying, okay, my governor and the deputy must be this and that should be that. And in fact, it will go down to like our children will even also begin to look at it as if it's something that should be enshrined in the Constitution and other things and blah, 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 blah. So we should be very, very careful. If you have choice, if you have the right of choice, you can go to any party that represents you well and vote. Just what you need to do is go and get your PVC, and vote. If you don't want APC because it's Muslim ticket, vote them out and vote against them. I think this is the best thing we should do. In fact, issues of this nature should even, to me, where I feel should not be discussed, because religion is a personal, is a private thing. When we go to the market, we don't think we go to buy things and then they begin to ask you, are you a Christian or Muslim before I sell my tomatoes to you, or you know, or whether hunger has a religion or not. So you see, these issues should be kept as secondary, not as a primary issue to be looking for leadership. You know, but it's unfortunate that some of us, we have derailed. We have cheapened ourselves to the level that we begin to discuss religion as part of. Somebody was saying in America, the vice president was chosen because no, it's not. They don't do their politics like that. They don't do it like that. He may have vote, yes, because he's a Christian, understood, but that does not mean because okay, we must make sure. That the time of America, the America we are talking about, Islam is a minority. So when they have Christian, it's not a big deal. So
okay.
In Saudi Arabia, you know, because Saudi Arabia is an Islamic country, so you will not have that problem. Even if they present Muslim ticket, his idea is okay.
All right.
So I think, sir, let me just conclude, sir, that people should just use their PVC, be quiet about what APC has done. APC is not the only party. It's not the only party.
All right, Mr. Aliu, thank you very much, just so that we can take other callers. But we appreciate your views, okay? Mr. Ali, you want a one-party system? Okay, I will take you up on this some other time, but thanks for calling in, okay? We always appreciate your viewpoint. All right. Okay, so yeah, we have a wide range of opinions. Mr. Ali feels that no, people shouldn't even be discussing this, they should be quiet. But I think what he needs to take into consideration is religion is at the center of many things here. So there is no way we can avoid discussing religion. Number one, this is also about educating people. It's also about sensitizing people. In fact, what he has done here is actually what actually gives reasons for discussing it. So when you say, tell people religion shouldn't be the most important thing, you are able to say that because we are discussing it. Okay, so Dr. Noel, maybe 30 seconds, Barrister Awakalu, 30 seconds, and then we'll wrap it up.
I think we are going through challenging times, and things are going to get more interesting in the coming months. What we need is focus, looking at candidates on this issue, looking at them from what they promise to bring to the country in terms of sustainable change, in terms of participatory democracy, in terms of turning the economy around from a buying economy, looking outside to import things, to an economy where things will be produced here, costs will be minimized, and frugal fiscal policies that conserve funds for the use of the downtrodden would be put in place. That's the type of thing we should be looking at. Not, okay. Yes, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, for me, the issue of religion, yes, ordinarily shouldn't in any way be part of our political discourse. But judging from our current situation in the last 7 years and thereabouts, it now makes it imperative. If it was a party, the reason it is so important is because it is the party in power that is doing this. And we know what the power of incumbency in Nigeria means in elections. So everybody, the antennas are all high up. What's going on? Where are we headed to? Now, today, we'll have Muslim, Christian ticket and in Aso Rock. Look at the appointments tilted towards one particular religion. Now, what happens when we now have a Muslim ticket, and that ticket happens to win?
I think it's better to leave it as a rhetorical question. Father Duniya, your closing remarks?
I think let's not forget where we left off. It's politics, security, and peace. And you know what comes up to us as political policies, in a way, can either impact on peace or on security or fuel insecurity. And that is why this last bit became even a boiling issue. For the listener out there, the temptation may even look as if we are discussing Muslim tickets, which is not really what we sat here to do today.
Exactly.
What we sat here to do was to look at it, but the range of things that politics plays to us and the kind of policies they bring can either impact or impede. So I think that I agree with our guests in the studio that in the days coming, let us watch and see, and let us be very vigilant and be ready to exercise our franchise with caution.
And I am going to say to all our listeners, please take keen interest in politics so that you are able to make informed and pragmatic choices when it is time to vote. And please sensitize the people around you on how to make a wise choice when it comes to voting. We have come to the end of today's edition of Side by Side. I must say a very big thank you to our guests. First, Dr. Noel Ihebuzor is a former lecturer, a public and social policy professional with many years of experience consulting with UNICEF, the World Health Organization, UNESCO, Institute for Peace at The Hague, and many others. And also Mr. John Awakalu Esquire. He has been a legal practitioner for over 3 decades now, an expert in litigation, a criminal defense attorney, property consultant, arbitrator, a medical law practitioner, a member of the Medical Law Professionals Association of Nigeria, MELPAN, and an expert in surrogacy-related issues. So when you want to do things about surrogacy, contact me and I'll contact Barrister Awakalu. Our listeners, thank you very much for joining on the program. The next edition of Side by Side will come your way on Monday, the 18th of July at 10 a.m. Until then, keep listening to Radio Maria 91.3 FM. I am Reverend Father Robert Achiaga.
And I am Reverend Father Louis Duniya.
Peace be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Reverend